Welcome to the fourth episode of Kansas Libertarians Today. I'm Chris Clemens.
I'm Ross Patrick.
And what we wanted to talk about today is morality laws. Now, what do I mean by morality laws? A morality law is a law that's been issued that basically forces a moral viewpoint on the rest of the population. And one of those particular moral viewpoints, at one point in time, was the anti-cannabis laws. But, to give some reason as to why I wanted to talk about this, it kind of gets into a conversation I had a couple weeks ago with my boss's wife. I've known my boss's wife for 12 years. I've been working for the same people for the last 12 years, since I was a sophomore in high school. And we always talk politics, and she's been a staunch Republican her whole life. And slowly but surely, I'm getting her to really kind of get into libertarianism. Good. And she's a very, very thoughtful person. She really considers the facts, and she really tends to be a very reasonable person. And Time Magazine came out with their issue of their cannabis cover.
It's really sweeping everywhere.
Yeah, and so anyways, I saw it sitting on her table. We were having a conversation, and I watched a person who I have a lot of respect for go from being a reasonable human being to being completely unreasonable.
Defensive.
Very defensive and very just wouldn't listen to a single word that I had to say.
Oh, wow.
Which I'd never seen before.
Yeah.
And what really kind of struck me was, A, the power of propaganda.
Yeah.
But how she felt morally justified in her viewpoint. Mm-hmm. And what it really kind of got me thinking about was that, in the 1970s and in 60s, we had Nixon come out with his drug war,
yeah.
And then we saw Reagan kind of ramp that drug war up,
building up,
and
more.
I think they might have had good intentions. They thought what they were doing for the country was right, but when they created these drug laws and so on and so forth, what we did was we basically engendered, don't know if that's the right term, but we basically took an entire sect of the population and then created criminals.
Yeah.
Right? And what we're seeing now is that as time has progressed, society has progressed, and information is now readily accessible, and people have learned that, well, this stuff isn't necessarily so bad, and society's morals have changed while our laws are still putting innocent people behind bars. So that's really why I wanted to kind of get into this subject. But I don't know, what's your take on all this?
Well, Chris, I want to go to the root of this issue. And the real issue is that when the government creates moral laws, like saying, and a moral law doesn't have to do with me versus you. Mm-hmm. For example, a violent crime is me stopping you from your individual rights, or if I steal something that is yours, I'm taking away from your rights. So that's what a real crime is. Now, these moral laws are saying something that I do or consume is not legal and making me a criminal. So what the government does when it creates moral laws, for example, alcohol prohibition, what it did is it created two classes of people. This is called class warfare. It created the class of people that were moral, defined by the government, and a class of people that were unmoral, defined by the government, that were now a criminal class. You could lose your right to vote. You could lose your right to have a firearm. And they created this system to take people that politically did not believe what they had and turn them into a criminal class. So in the fundamental root of libertarian philosophy, we have to understand is that the individual has the right to consume and create his own morals. And as long as his morals doesn't stop the morals of the other individual, then he doesn't need the government to create moral laws on him and then enforce those on him, because it takes away his First Amendment, which is the First Amendment of the freedom of religion, because you can't then enforce one religion on anybody or one moral code. You have to allow that individual to decide what their moral code is, and as long as they don't mess with any other individuals, then they can do as they please.
And you bring up the religious aspect. There's all sorts of different anti-religion laws on the books, and obviously the Christians like to cry about this thing or that thing. But, you have a lot of religions that, as a religious sacrament, might have psilocybin or might have, cannabis itself as the religious sacrament. And by going through and prohibiting the use of these things, you're essentially saying that in order to participate in your religion, you are now a criminal, which, as you said, is a direct violation of our First Amendment protections. Yeah. So, and I think another thing we really have to consider is, we're talking about drug laws a little bit because that's the low-hanging fruit.
Yes.
Right? But there's all sorts of morality laws that are on the books. And I think what a lot of people have to understand is that, Democrats and Republicans switch power all the time.
Yeah.
So one time we might have a Congress that's more Democrat side, and they're going to pass their ideas of what morality should be. And then the power's going to shift back to the Republicans, and they're going to pass a bunch of laws. And what we get is a legal code where most people don't even know where they stand, whether or not they're breaking laws or not. And what we've really created is a society that at any point in time you could be fined or arrested for one of a dozen different things that you think are just fine.
Yeah.
But there might be a law in the books from 1920 that just never got erased, and, well, now you're violating this law. And I think it really kind of ties into society, and society's values change at a rapid pace.
Yeah.
And just to give you an idea just how fast it was, 10 years ago, the idea of gay marriage was abhorrent to most of your politicians. For example, Hillary Clinton, 10 years ago, was asked about gay marriage, and she said that she was for traditional marriage. Even Barack Obama, when he took office, had a different standpoint than he does now. So what we have to understand is when we draft a law, that law is going to be on the books for a very long time. Laws are very, very, very difficult to get rid of.
Yes.
To whereas societal norms and societal morals change at a very rapid pace. And what we have today is a legal code that is out of date with what our own society actually believes in and believes is moral. So the reason I think libertarianism is so needed right now is we really have to get to that fundamental pillar of exactly what a free society is. So long as you're not harming another individual, you're not a criminal.
Yes.
And it's that simple. And what that does is it allows society to move at its own pace without the hindrance of all these legal, all this legal dead weight, so to speak. So anyways, we have all these laws. They're hard to change. What is it that we can do right now as a society to possibly lessen the burden of some of these morality laws?
Well, I think what we can do today as each individuals in our system right now is that if you get called for jury duty, you go and you step up and you take that jury duty as your duty to your society, our civilization, our law, our state, our government. And what we do is we go into those juries and we say we can have the power of jury nullification. And what jury nullification will say is if we do not think what that person did was immoral and a law that was harming our commonwealth as a community, we can nullify it and say, you know what, we don't think he should be charged with an ounce of marijuana. And then if we all start doing that in the jury box, we have more power than those legislators to actually let those individual people in our community free. And then eventually what will happen is people won't enforce those laws anymore because the juries won't convict them. So jury nullification is what we can do today to start moving this back to where we do not create one moral code for the entire population, but allow individuals to choose what moral code works for them and then to live out their life. I think that's the true pursuit of happiness.
Right. And to kind of just clarify a little bit, or to give an example, right now, Shauna Banda is facing 30 years in prison and to have her child taken from her custody because she was using CBD oil to cure her Crohn's disease. And all that has to happen is the jury who sits there on her case, what they can do is they can say, hey, she might be guilty of the crime, but because we don't find this to be a just law, we're going to vote not guilty. And that's all you have to do. You
Simple.
have the ability to just say not guilty. Yeah, they technically committed this crime, but this law is unjust.
Yeah.
So
That's the power of the people.
It's the power of the people, and more people need to understand that that is the way for us to overturn the legislative power.
That's right. We still have that check as an individual over the legislator in case the legislator gets tyrannical and starts making moral laws. We can overrule it.
Right. So I think that's good for this episode. Again, as always, if you would like to leave a comment or a suggestion, feel free to do so. Until next time, I'm Chris Clemens.
I'm Ross Patrick.
Have a good one.